Welcome everybody to our online program on addiction and recovery from the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, BC. And we've been talking about Rob Ford because as you all know, he's been in the news a lot and on late night talk shows and pretty much everywhere else as far as I can see. But in particular, we're interested in an article written in the Star that was published under the heading that, what would rehab be like if Rob Ford would enter drug rehab? And then it presented this description of rehab that, frankly, if I were an addict, I'm thinking, like, this doesn't exactly sound pleasant. People are not going to treat me as if I'm at all trustworthy. Just the article, the way it described it, its tone was almost condescending. That, this person has to learn humility. This person has to learn that he cannot trust his own thinking. This person has to follow instructions. And if he doesn't follow instructions, he gets kicked out. I mean, all of this way of operating in a therapeutic atmosphere, and then presented by the Star as if somehow this is the actual way every rehab operates. But a lot of rehabs don't operate like that, and I always wondered if if someone coming into a rehab were felt that he'd be treated, he or she, be treated as, a human being. If they were treated as what they had to say was worthwhile, if they were treated as they were the author of their life and they got it was their duty to make decisions on how their life would go. Well, this kind of basically treating them as a human being who happens to suffer from an addiction. Whether or not that might eliminate some of the struggles that we have in treatment, because it's estimated, now the estimates vary, but a recent estimate was that 80% of people with addiction problems refuse to enter treatment. And researchers who have looked into this have found out that very often they don't even like the idea of treatment because they feel they lose control, because they've seen Michael Keaton in Clean and Sober, and they've seen Sandra Bullock in 28 Days, and Meg Ryan in When a Man Loves a Woman. They've seen that this is how rehabs operate, and they're not particularly thrilled about them. And I'm wondering if they were feeling that they would be treated as a human being with dignity and respect, whether or not that might change their decision whether or not to go to treatment. Another thing that the researchers have pointed out in addiction treatment is what I refer to as the revolving door syndrome. I mean, a lot of people actually have been in and out of treatment quite consistently. Alan Marlett, who passed away a couple of years ago, he came up with this concept called the abstinence violation effect. And the abstinence violation effect was, if I go to rehab and then, I have a few beers or go do some cocaine, then I will feel myself a complete failure. And Marlett said this doesn't do anyone any good, because if I get this feeling I'm a failure, well, why not go out and use some more drugs, right? And so, and the idea that if I'm kicked out of treatment for not following rules or anything, whether the person would feel that I'm a failure, and this would simply reinforce it, right? Rather than looking at it, again, as a human being and treating them with respect. And in psychology, we have this sort of baseline we operate on called, from Carl Rogers, called unconditional positive regard. And genuineness. I would be upfront with the client, and I would treat them, no matter what they told me or anything, I would still treat them as worthy human beings. And if people had that sense of that's what rehab could be like, whether that would encourage more people to come into treatment. There are some very famous people in the field. I'm thinking of Carlton Erickson, who is an expert on brain science and addiction. And he makes the point in one of his books that very often families and the public, they're so angry they just want to punish the addict. So they're quite happy to send them to a place where, basically lock them up, or some of the clients have called it a boot camp, right? That kind of concept. But it has very little to do with therapy and helping people change behaviors, right? But, if you have this feeling you're angry and you're frustrated and you find your loved ones lying to you constantly and you don't know what to trust and in fact the trust is completely broken, and you get the idea that, well, maybe we need a place that is going to lock him up and take his wallet away, and he's got to follow a bunch of rules, and somehow this will lead to good recovery. But a more modern way of thinking is, why don't we try to get the person to want to change, and create a space for them where they feel free to be themselves, regardless of what they think or say, that they have no feeling to distort or deny what's actually going on inside of them to fit into some mold because they're afraid of being confronted with something, right? And this new way of thinking seems to be giving us better success rates. Again, the success rates are one of those really confusing things. Depends on basically how you measure success. But anyway, just to provide this atmosphere, whether people would feel more comfortable entering treatment, which is ultimately what we're interested in, is giving people who are suffering horribly because of the addiction and feeling that, maybe there's this place that will help me, go on and live a better life. Maybe that approach has got a lot more benefits than the kind of approach described in the Star, in that article, where basically, again, even the tone of it was somehow that the addict is less of a human being by virtue of having an addiction. At any rate, things to think about. And that's it for this version of our online program, and we'll be back next time with a new topic.